right. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to co-directors Kelly O'Sullivan and Alex Thompson, the co-directors of Ghostlight, a new film releasing in Australian cinemas from October 10th. And uh, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Peter.
And Kelly, you also wrote the screenplay. What was the inspiration behind Ghostlight?
Oh gosh. Well, I am a theater person. I grew up doing theater. I started doing children's theater when I was 6 years old. And it's sort of been the great love of my life, especially small theater. I started in community theater and have done tons of small black box theater where there were maybe 10 people in the audience. And so wanting to write about a world that I know and love, and then especially I started writing this during the pandemic, and especially wanted to write something that felt connective, that felt like community building. Um, that was really the point of inspiration. And then Romeo and Juliet came to me, and the idea of wanting to see Romeo and Juliet from a parental point of view, all of that sort of fed into what would become the story.
Well, it's a really well-constructed story. I was quite impressed with the interplay between the man who's suffering and gets inveigled into being in Romeo and Juliet in a local theatre production, and coping with that grief and a background of grief and his own relationships at home. And I mean, there were a lot of intricate aspects to the story. It must have taken you a while to construct the story and to get that sort of right.
It did, yeah. I mean, the overall idea actually formed very quickly in my head. Alex was in the edit for a different film, and I remember I texted him basically the entire plot in one long text chain. But then the details of it, the all of the ins and outs and the specifics of it took a couple of years for me to actually sit down and plunk out on my computer and then workshop with actors and workshop with Alex and get it to a point that it felt really ready to go.
Well, well done on that. So tell me the process of both of you directing the film, because it must have been an interesting process for both of you to work on that.
Yeah, I mean, we had worked together very closely on our first film, St. Francis, which directed and Kelly wrote and starred in. And so the idea of sort of approaching a film with a chiefly collaborative lens was not totally foreign to us. I think on that film, actually, there was even more sort of deference paid to the writing because it came from such a personal place and such a specific lens. Um, and I felt like I just really needed to get out of the way of that script. And with Ghostlight, it was much, but we were both at the helm. Um, and it was really lucky. I mean, I think the fact that we share very similar taste, very similar intention is really quite lucky. Like I don't know how other people do it. It seems quite hard. It's hard enough when you tend to agree on things, but we sort of developed a rule where informal rule where if one of us felt extremely strongly about something, if we were at a 90% and the other person was like, I take it or leave it, I'll fight for it, but I don't really care that much, you'd give it over to the person who felt very strongly, because if you end up compromising on every little decision, your film might become quite middling and boring and dull. And so we hope that that preserved a sense of urgency and intention. Despite the fact that there's two directors, it feels like a unified
Yeah.
story.
Okay, sounds good. What made you decide to title the film Ghostlight?
So Ghostlight in theater, it's this tradition of having a bulb left on stage overnight when the theater has gone dark and everyone's gone home, and it's a safety requirement, but also theaters are traditionally known to be very haunted. And the idea is that you leave a bowl burning for the ghosts to either scare them away, or I like the idea that it's to light their way. And so knowing the themes, if people see the movie, I think they'll start to understand why that resonates.
Okay, no, that's good explanation, because at first when I saw the title, I thought, this could be a horror film or a ghostly film or
Right.
anything like
I
Right.
know.
that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I worry that people will show up to the theater and will be like, "Where are the jump scares?"
Yeah.
And there aren't any. Spoiler alert.
Okay, no, that works really well. Now let's talk about cast. Keith Kupferer, Tara Mullen, and from Triangle of Sadness, Dolly De Leon. You have a really good cast. How did you get them?
Well, I would say 99% of them are Chicago theater actors who we've known or known of in some capacity for most of the last 10 years for me and 20 years for you being in the city. And so Keith, we had both known Keith for years, and Kelly was actually in a show with Keith where he played her father
Mhm.
12 years ago.
Yeah, I think 10 years ago.
10
Yeah.
years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's one of those actors in Chicago that you always see and you always appreciate and you're always happy to have seen. And so I think it was in the back of your mind to write for him at some point.
Hmm.
And it was in the back of my mind to work with him at some point. So um, yeah, it all kind of started with Keith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the cast, I mean, Catherine, who plays Daisy, who plays his daughter, is his real life daughter. And Tara, who plays the mother, is Catherine's real life mother and Keith's wife. And it just, I mean, we got so lucky that all of them are incredibly talented and that we would have cast all of them individually. But then having them as a family was just, getting to capture magic on screen. And Dolly, we had seen in Triangle of Sadness. And luckily, we share a manager who is able to, talk us up to him and say, hey, you should give these people a shot. And she read the script and responded to Rita. And so we were lucky enough to get to work with her.
Yeah.
Well done. I mean, they're all excellent, and it was great to see Dolly in that role as the theatre director there, trying to help, almost like a psychologist, I suppose, more than anything
Yeah.
Right.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She does
Yeah,
have a bit of, yeah.
yeah. No, that worked really well. How easy was it to make the film insofar as getting production and budget and locations and so on behind you?
It was relatively easy. I mean, we had been gearing up for a much bigger film, actually a film we're shooting right now. And the strikes sort of upended that plan. And so we were like all set for this great big lift. And Ghostlight was sort of the pivot, was the smaller pivot. It was something that we all just really very badly wanted to do and wanted to make happen, by any means necessary. And so there was a great deal of goodwill, I guess you could call it. Elbow grease is another way of putting it, that got us through. But it was very easy. I mean, there was a lot of love for St. Francis, and I think folks were very interested in what we were doing next. And Ghostlight was a modest film by production means, and so we made do with a little, but we tried to squeeze a lot out of that lemon. So you know, hopefully to good effect. Um,
It certainly works really well, and I'm intrigued too with the way you rehearse the actors, because obviously there were a number of them in the film, apart from the leads that we've talked about. How easy was it working with them and getting that process right in terms of what you wanted?
It was incredibly easy to work with them because all of them come from the theater. And so when we got together, we would, I would actually teach them theater games and we would play those theater games and then just capture it on camera. And we would rehearse scenes like you would a play, except that, the first take is opening night. And when you're done with it, you don't get to revisit it. So that process was different, but it helped that we were all coming from the same foundation of theater and could talk about a scene dramaturgically and could incorporate all of us sort of when I would say like let's do breathing exercises, nobody was rolling their eyes, everyone knew exactly what that was and could dive in immediately, so it was a total joy.
Yes. And the analogy with Romeo and Juliet and how that can impact present day
Yeah.
is very well achieved. You even mentioned Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Yeah,
His film is, I mean, his film is iconic. I think it's sweet and funny that Daisy thinks of it as the old
Hmm.
version, but I think for us it was sort of
For
quite,
me, it's the touchstone.
yeah, it's the touchstone of growing up.
It's
That's
the way I thought about Romeo and Juliet because that was the first time I saw it produced. I hadn't seen the play version. I just remember Claire Danes and those angel wings and Leonardo DiCaprio and the two of them through the fish tank. And so it was really fun to get to write it in as a way for Daisy, to share it with her dad.
yes. No, I like the way that dovetailed together, and everyone was able to make a personal connection, if you like, with an older Shakespearean play. So really, really interesting. Uh, Now, how has the film been rolled out? Because I gather it's been seen at festivals or at other screenings. And what sort of reactions have you been getting?
Well, we premiered at Sundance last year, the earlier
Mhm.
this year, and it was really a surprise. It was very humbling. I mean, it's a small movie, but it feels very big when you're in a room like that. And so the film was released in the United States in the spring,
Yeah.
in the spring.
Hmm.
So very soon after the
The
premiere
summer. Yeah.
in
The
the
early
summer,
summer.
yeah, and was on over 500 screens,
Hmm.
and is just starting to get out into the world. So um, it's been very moving. I think theater seems to do a lot for people, even if they aren't from the theater. We met several people who said that they're going to try to get their parents into an acting class now. Um, I take it that not everybody is able to like talk to their parents, which is I think a very common thing. But I think there are a lot of Dans in the world who are sort of hungering for that release.
Yeah. Well, there's so much community theatre and so on in the US in particular that this will re-energize the the interest in it. I think the Ghostlight. So that's well done on that.
Great.
And you mentioned before you're working on another film at the moment.
We are. That's
Yeah,
why we look so tired.
yeah,
Is we were shooting until 4 a.m. last night.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's a movie called Mouse. Just it's set in Arkansas, so very
mm,
excited. Don't have too many details to share, just because we'd hate to jinx it, but we're in our second week of production, so chugging along.
Excellent stuff. Well, I really enjoyed Ghostlight, and now that it's releasing in Australia on October 10th, that is great to see. So we've been speaking to Kelly O'Sullivan and Alex Thompson, co-directors of Ghostlight. Go and see it. It's a really intriguing film. Thank you so much for talking with me.
thank
Thank you,
you. Thanks for the
Peter. Thank you.
conversation.
Okay, all the
That
best.
was